60 years ago, curator Louise Bourgeois presented Eccentric Abstraction at the Fishback Gallery in New York. That show took 8 sculptors who broke away from the minimalist style of the time. Today, the Courtauld Gallery presents Abstract Erotic, a group show with Louise Bourgeois, Eva Hesse and Alex Adams. They were the only 3 women featured in Lipid's show in 1966.
So the post-war years in New York were really seeing the aftermath of earlier modernist practices, the rise of abstract expressionist painting. So we're thinking about large gestural, all-over painted surfaces, or large-scale monumental modernist sculpture, all abstract. But what changed in the 60s, really coming out of the 1950s, was a turn towards unconventional materials, forms and shapes, and the abstract erotic, the joining of those 2 words is really key. There were other shows happening in New York in this time that were filled with erotica, with sexually explicit, sexist kind of images of the time that were designed to titillate audiences. And for Lippard, the abstract erotic was the opposite of this.
As you enter the gallery, and this was not an accident, the first thing really you see hanging from the corner of one wall is a large phallus, and it is Louise Bourgeois' work entitled Fillette, Sweeter Version. It looks casual, but theatrical, and there is a sense of haha, 2 fingers up to the idea that the phallus equals power. Mm-hmm. And she does write about that. And then she also says, there were men in my life, this is my imagery, I have a tenderness towards the phallus. I mean, it's not one thing.
Bourgeois, Hesse and Adams also challenged conventions around what materials were suitable for sculpture.
So just going through our exhibition and what is represented here, we have fishnet, plastic bags basically, polyethylene, latex, synthetic and natural, rusted steel, painted steel, chain link fencing, aluminum chain link fencing, rubber tubes, papier-mâché.
Latex, as every artist who began to work with it in the 60s immediately understood, is quite volatile and it changes over time. It darkens, it becomes brittle, it dries out, and it loses some of its earlier transparency, but at the same time it retains that sort of fleshy bodily quality that was so appealing to artists in the 60s.
The Courtauld Gallery rarely exhibits sculpture in its temporary exhibitions. The last time that was the case was in 2016 for a Rodin show. Most of those sculptures were miniatures and kept together in large glass cases. The importance of tactility has completely changed the use of space in the gallery today.
We didn't want anyone to touch them. That's definitely did not want. So, you want to feel like you would like to, and we didn't want you to feel like it was, a forbidden thing. So, rather than have them in cases, and we couldn't have had that in a case anyway, or rather than create a big distance between the visitor and the object, we devised a wonderful system of curved, or we think very successful system of curved kind of bases, mini plinths, so that the visitors know, please do not go beyond here. Whereas if you go to a bigger exhibition and you have that same required distance, it's always the same in galleries, you sometimes feel a bit frustrated, the work is far away. But here it feels in your space, I think. And then for works that we really wanted people to get close up to because they're small, we'd put them behind a case so that you could get close.
We decided to include photographs of the artists in their studios or at work. It's not controversial to have artist photographs, but it is something that sometimes people wonder why you would do that with an exhibition. And I think when it is just included as a kind of a smiling portrait, often in the case of women artists, you do think, why would you do that? Why do you have to kind of bring this kind of personal aspect in? So we decided that rather than just decorate the exhibition with a portrait of the artist, we would incorporate really, in some cases quite well known, in others not at all, important historic photographs to really show them engaging with their work, to kind of remind us of its tactile qualities.
The artists have been compared to surrealism throughout their careers. The Guardian's review of Abstract Erotic compares a work by Eva Hesse to Suspended Ball by Giacometti. Louise Bourgeois was the first to make a connection, comparing the group to surrealism just 2 sentences into her groundbreaking essay, Eccentric Abstraction. Yet, in her revised version in 1971, she seemingly regrets this association, claiming she overemphasized the surrealist connection.
Surrealism on the face of it makes sense, but it comes with a certain amount of baggage, figurative baggage, certainly a very male-dominated movement that really felt, I think, by the time these artists were hitting their stride, to not quite serve the works in the way that it perhaps did initially. And so and that's what's so important and wonderful about Lippard as a writer and a thinker and as a critic, is that she will look back and reflect and rethink things, and she recognises the importance of this show, but also recognises that maybe her terms might be slightly different now. But it was a snapshot of a moment, and for that we are incredibly grateful.
Lippard's show was generally well received, but the works of the three women were typically not pushed to the forefront of the exhibition. While she didn't realise it at the time, Lippard later recognised that the works to be seen through a feminist lens.
It's something that Lippard herself recognised later. She says, you know, looking back at eccentric abstraction, I can see now I was looking for feminist art. She doesn't become a feminist until the late 60s. She's now renowned as an incredibly important feminist activist and critic. But at that time, feminism wasn't a word on the lips of artists and critics in the mid-60s, and women artists were frequently overlooked and ignored. It was hard to get gallery representation, it was hard to get sales. So really, for women artists in the post-war years to bandy together under the label women artists was anathema to them, because they understood this immediately sidelined you for women-only shows at best. And what I find so interesting is that these were artists that we could look at now and absolutely understand as moving towards what we can later comfortably describe as maybe a feminist practice. But at the time, they were really striking out on their own, just trying to find a language that made sense of their world and what it is they were trying to say with their work.